We're going to call this meeting to order, the Air Pollution Control District Board of Directors, Santa Barbara County. Today's June 20th, 2019, and we need a roll call, please, Ms. Clerk.
Director Patino? Toussaint? Williams?
Here.
Hart?
Here.
Hartman?
Here.
Adam? Lavanino?
Here.
Sierra?
Here.
Clark? Perotti?
Here.
Rubalcaba?
Here.
Mosby?
Here.
And Chair Murillo.
Here. Thank you. We'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We've had some agenda rearranging to accommodate our members' schedules. So we're going to items D, which is our administrative items. So does anyone want to pull one of these D items? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to move them forward.
Chair Murillo,
Yes,
I would
Director
like to
Hartman.
pull D2 if I could.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Clerk, would you read item D, please? D2?
Item D2 is to receive and file the following grant-related activity. A, an update on the old car buyback program for vehicles retired during the period of March 1st, 2019 through March 31st, 2019. B, an update on the wood smoke reduction program for fireplace and stove replacement projects during the period of October 25th, 2018 through May 31st, 2019. And C, summary of the emission reduction grant agreements approved by the Air Pollution Control Officer for the period of May 1st, 2019 through June 6, 2019 in accordance with Board Resolution number 9-14.
Director Hartman, go ahead.
Thank you. My question had to do with how we might consider expanding this grant program to include perhaps an incentive to buy back gas-fired leaf blowers. I've had a number of visits in my office asking whether we might do this, and so that's the question that I'm putting forward.
Thank you, Ms. Arlen Janae.
Good afternoon. Yes, actually with our new fund, our Clean Air Fund that the board approved a few meetings back, we're evaluating an incentive program that's geared to garden equipment, and that includes the replacement of gas-powered lawn leaf blowers to electric. It's under development now. We're going to be bringing back recommendation for your board to consider, not just the leaf blowers, but other devices as well that are used for landscape maintenance. We don't have an exact date when we're going to bring that back to you. Probably within the year. Our goal is to have it up and running spring of next year if possible.
Thank you. Good news. You're ahead of us.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion to move forward these administrative items?
Move the administrative agenda.
Second?
Okay, that was Williams, Sierra, it sounded like, first and second. Okay. And we'll take a roll call vote, please.
And before we call roll call, just checking to see if there's any public comment. Okay, thank you. Director Patino? Here. Oh, sorry, this is to approve the administrative agenda. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I was late.
Williams?
Here. Aye.
Hart?
See what you started.
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Lavanino? Aye. Sierra?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Rubalcaba? Aye. Mosby? Aye. And Chair Murillo.
Aye. Okay, that carries. And we will have general public comment later in the meeting, unless there's somebody who needs to go now on items. I don't see anyone here. Anyone in Santa Barbara? You all look like they need to come up and speak. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll
Besides
move on
Liz,
to...
the room is empty.
The room is empty. Okay, very good. We're moving on to item G3, Ms. Hunt.
Item G3 is a hearing to consider recommendations as follows. A, hold a public hearing to receive testimony on the proposed amendments to Rule 361, small boilers, steam generators, and process heaters, and Rule 342, control of oxides of nitrogen from boilers, steam generators, and process heaters. B, adopt a resolution which will result in the following actions. First, adopt the California Environmental Quality Act findings that include a determination that an addendum has been prepared pursuant to CEQA, and the addendum, together with the final environmental impact report for the 2010 Clean Air Plan, has been reviewed and considered by the board prior to approval of this project. Second, adopt the general rule findings in support of the proposed rule amendments pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 40727 regarding necessity, authority, clarity, consistency, non-duplication, and reference. And third, adopt the proposed amendments to Rule 361 and 342.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to be soon handing the baton over to Tim Mitro. He's air quality engineer in our planning division. But before doing so, I just wanted to highlight this is something I've been bringing to your board primarily in my APCO comments and discussing our progress as we work through our rule schedule and the ozone plan and our BARC schedule. As you'll see in the timeline, we've been focused on these rules since October, and it's been a team effort with not only the planning division, but the engineering division as well, and working with the local sources. So we have a PowerPoint that Tim's going to provide, and then we'll be able to respond to your questions after his PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. So as I said, today, or as Aaron introduced me, my name is Tim Mitro, Air Quality Engineer, and so we will be discussing the proposed amendments for District Rules 361 and 342, which affects the boilers, steam generators, and water heaters, and process heaters greater than 2 million BTU per hour. So to begin with, Santa Barbara County is non-attainment transitional for the state ozone standard. And what this means is we still have to adopt all feasible measures to help meet this health-based standard. In the 2016 ozone plan, we committed to amend both Rules 361 and 342 to achieve additional NOx reductions. And these NOx reductions will help the county both attain and maintain the ozone standard. Oh, can't hear me? A little better? Okay. All right. So to begin with, let's kind of look at the current rules that are on the books today. District Rule 361 was originally adopted back in January of 2008, and this applies to the medium-sized boilers, those rated between 2 to 5 million BTU per hour. So these boilers are combusting fuel such as natural gas, and one of the primary pollutants of concern through the combustion process is NOx. We have approximately 150 of these units in the district located at various facilities such as hospitals, schools, oil and gas facilities, hotels, or any other commercial or institutional type facility. The current emission standards that we have for all newly installed and modified units is 30 parts per million, or ppm, of NOx. The majority of the units in the district meet this standard, but there are still a few older existing units that are still out there. They were installed prior to 2008, and so back when we were adopting this rule, we gave them a 12-year sunset period to reach that 30 ppm standard. So we have that upcoming standard in January of 2020. As for Rule 342, it was originally adopted back in March of 1992, and now we're looking at the larger industrial-sized units. So we have a few less of them in the county, but around 60 in total. These are also at hospitals, oil and gas facilities, and larger manufacturing facilities. Rule 342 requires the units to meet 30 ppm NOx, as low NOx burners were commercially available for these size units all the way back in the early 1990s. So let's focus on what the rule amendments that we're proposing today. Over the last 15 years, we've seen advancements in boiler technology, where boilers can be equipped with ultra-low NOx burners, and that means they can reach even lower levels than the existing 30 ppm standards that we have on the books. So the ultra low NOx burners can get anywhere between 7 to 12 ppm NOx. And so you can see in the right column in green what the various limits that we are proposing. And they are going to differ based on the size of the unit and the configuration of the unit, which is why they're slightly different. So over 95% of the boilers in the district are fired on either natural gas or field gas from the oil fields. And so that's why we're showing the emission standards for those fuel types right here. There are slightly higher NOx emission limits for other fuel types, such as propane, landfill gas, and digester gas, as those fuels tend to have impurities that can affect the combustion process. Overall, though, the proposed amendments will apply for all newly installed and modified units on or after January 1st of 2020. So this is not going to be a retrofit requirement for the majority of units, and only the new, and the older boilers will eventually be replaced through their natural attrition. The emission limits that we're proposing today are based off of rules that we've already seen adopted from other air districts, mainly the South Coast Air Quality Management District and the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District adopted similar rules back in 2008. Our neighbor Ventura County also adopted their boiler rule back in 2015. Some of the other changes that we're proposing including adding new definitions, updating the tune-up procedures, reorganizing the sections, and removing obsolete language to make sure that the rules are clear and concise. So these rules that we're proposing today are anticipated to get around 16 tons per year of NOx at full implementation. As this is primarily a point of installation rule, these reductions will occur with the unit turnover as the older units are replaced and new units are installed. But to achieve these emission reductions, there will be additional capital, operating, and maintenance costs incurred by the end users. And so that's where cost effectiveness comes in. Rule development proceedings are required to document whether the rules are cost effective. So we did our research by contacting multiple boiler and burner vendors to get the prices for these ultra low NOx burners. And this includes companies like Alzita, California Boiler, and Parker Boiler. We also reviewed the published cost data from other air districts and reviewed the age and operational loads of the affected units in the county. Overall, we tried to make accurate yet conservative estimates to refine the incremental costs for this rule development proceeding. And so based on our analysis, we saw around a cost effectiveness of $12,000 to just under $21,000 per ton of NOx reduced. And this will vary depending on the size of the unit. So as this is within the range of previously adopted prohibitory rules, these amendments are considered to be cost effective for Santa Barbara County. So far in this presentation, we've mainly been talking about the ozone plan changes. But as we've mentioned in past board hearings, we have another requirement that we need to meet too, the Assembly Bill 617 Best Available Retrofit Control Technology Requirements. So these BARCed requirements will apply to industrial sources subject to the state cap and trade program, and there are 6 AB 617 industrial sources in the county as shown on this map. These 6 industrial sources were identified based on their actual emissions. As of January of 2017, all 6 of these sources emitted greater than 25,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases, making them the largest stationary sources of GHGs in the county. In reviewing the equipment units at these facilities, most of them use boilers and process heaters, and some of which are quite old. So AB 617 BARCed analysis, we are required to prioritize the permitted units that have not been modified for the greatest period of time. So rules 361 and 342 were identified on the district's BARCed rule development schedule as adopted in December 2018. For the Rule 361 units, the proposed revisions will require BARCed no later than 1 year after rule adoption. So this one-year timeline was chosen because the units still have conventional uncontrolled burners, and the units will be required to be updated this year anyhow due to existing rule requirements. So if adopted today, a total of 4 units, which are located at both ERG and Imerys, would have to meet the ultra-low NOx standard by June of 2020. For the Rule 342 changes, the proposed revisions require BART no later than December 31st of 2023. This change mainly affects 4 permitted units at Imerys and ExxonMobil. We have seen these ultra-low NOx burners used in other steam generators at these large sources. Both ERG and PCEC already use them, so they don't have to make any changes to comply with the proposed requirements. And finally, the district looked at the Windset Farms carbon dioxide dosing process. So Windset Farms uses their boilers in a specialized way where the boiler exhaust is actually directed into the greenhouse to provide the necessary nutrients for the plants. So we found that it was not feasible for their boilers to meet the ultra low NOx standard while maintaining near zero carbon monoxide emissions. That near zero CO emissions is really important for both the plants and the worker safety. So we established a separate BART requirement for Windset Farms to allow them slightly higher NOx emissions while still maintaining the other rule requirements that most boiler units or most boiler operators have to maintain. Oops, a little bit too far. Okay. So that wraps up the amendment summary for the rules, and on this slide I've shown the key milestones that have brought us to today. So at the end of 2018, we went through the BART rule development schedule, which included the public notice, the joint workshop and CAC meeting, and then going through your board approval process in December. So right after that was done, we immediately got to work on getting the specifics for the rules and writing up the rule language. So we performed a public notice back in February to all the permitted sources and everyone who subscribes to our e-notices to invite them to our public workshop in March. We had our public workshop in Solvang, and after that period, we got it ready for the Community Advisory Council meeting in May. After the May meeting, we went through another public notice where we, again, sent out direct mailings to all the permitted boiler owners, sent out e-notices to everyone who subscribes on our subscription list, and also a notice in the newspaper to invite them to today's board hearing. So during the last year, various agencies, industry representatives, and the general public had a chance to weigh in on these proposed amendments. We forwarded the rules to both the California Air Resources Board and the Environmental Protection Agency, and they had no comments or recommended changes. As mentioned, we had our rule workshop, which was well attended by various permitted facilities. And after that rule workshop, we had a comment period. We received some comments from Windset Farms, which was incorporated into the staff report and into the Rule 342 BART analysis. And so that brought us to the CAC meeting. And so the CAC, our Community Advisory Council, they thoroughly reviewed the rules and they unanimously approved or unanimously recommended that the board approve the rules as written. And then after that, we began preparing the rule package for this board hearing. A few minor changes to the wording in the proposed rules was necessary to enhance their clarity since the CAC meeting. So, for example, we referenced the December 31st, 2023 date in a few more sections to make sure that it was clear as to when the Rule 342 BART standards apply. But these changes do not affect the meaning of the rules. We also received a comment from ERG on June 4th as it pertained to the cost effectiveness of replacing their 40-year-old process heaters. The district staff requested additional information related to their comment and to date have not received data to support the costs that were provided. So that concludes the overview of the project, and at this point, staff recommends that your board hold a public hearing to receive testimony on the proposed amendments. Staff also recommends that your board adopt the resolution and the amendments to Rules 361 and 342. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you.
Questions for Mr. Mitro? We'll start here in Santa Maria. Mr. Lavanino, Director Lavanino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of questions. So 16-ton reduction, so put that into perspective for me. How much is out there right now? What are we producing right now?
So as far as our stationary sources of combustion, what the district has, that's about, it's about a 1% reduction in the stationary source emissions.
Okay.
So,
All right.
boilers and process heaters overall make about 4 or 5% of that.
Okay, great. And then I think your mic might have gone off again.
It did
That's all
go
right.
off again. I
All right, so it was
apologize.
1%.
It was around 1%.
Okay. All right, I was hoping for something larger than 1, but that's okay. The other thing is, so if we weren't in transitional, if we were in attainment, we wouldn't have to comply with this? Or there's districts that don't have to comply because they're in attainment?
So if we were in attainment, we would not have to meet all feasible measures. And so that is the ozone plan portion of it, where we're still trying to get those additional NOx reductions to make sure we both meet or attain the standard and maintain it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from Santa Maria? Mr. Mosby?
Is there a component of an appeals process on this? Once the rule comes into effect, I mean, you would think maybe there's somebody that had a hardship component. A lot of times when you have something imposed, you don't really know what the burden's going to be. Is there an appeals component?
One option that would be available to the sources is a variance from our hearing board, a variance request of not being able to meet a requirement of a rule. And that's the body that your board appoints, and variances are heard on a number of items related to permit or rule conditions that a company, for whatever reason, is not able to meet. Going through a variance, you have to find, is it 6 findings that the hearing board has to satisfy in order to take action? But that's a common avenue that permitted sources have when they aren't able to meet requirements, regulatory requirements.
I guess more directly, I'm asking, is there ability to somebody to appeal a decision made all the way to this board?
No. Yeah.
Our legal counsel has something to say?
Madam Chair and Director Mosby, no, for the variance procedure, that goes to the hearing board, and they're the decision maker. And what's before you is a quasi-legislative item, so adoption of this is not appealable by a particular operator.
Well, I think there's usually always an avenue to get to that component. The reason why I say this is because I see some of these could rise to the level of maybe putting some components of businesses out of business. And you'd like to make sure that what you're doing has an option to potentially retract some of the movements that you're moving forward with. We don't know the full financial burdens imposed by this. We hear a component of saving money, but we don't really know, and we'd hate to see people. And the reason why I ask is I believe there should be an ability to people to get to the elected body at some degree, especially something that could potentially be putting somebody out of business. And that's why I'm referencing that. I know you say it's quasi-jurisdiction. Yes, that we're doing here, but I like to see people to be able to have the way to appeal to the elected officials.
And I would think that going through this public process, when we started back in October with the BARC schedule discussion as it relates to the specific BARC requirements that are before you today, that also went through a public process and went through the CAC, and it was approved. And that was an opportunity for the impacted entities to come and make their case before the board. At that point, we had support and we didn't have opposition with our BARC schedule. Then proceeding from that and going into the individual rulemaking process, this has been a long process and plenty of time, or amount of time, for entities to also reach out to their elected officials. So I think we're in that window right now as far as entities that were impacted by this rule to assess the impacts and make their concerns known. Once the rule is in place, our variance process is an effective tool. If a situation comes up, for example, if you have a project that the timing might not be right for you, when you have other things on the horizon, there's some consideration of variance from the existing requirements in order to accommodate what might be on the horizon, but are not required to do right now.
And the reason why I bring this up is because sometimes you don't, feel the pain until you have to pay for the pain. And that's why I'm bringing this out. I'm not sure the full burdens that are imposed here, and maybe the businesses aren't fully sure of the full burdens imposed. And that's why, but if there is a mechanism through the variance and, for the record that, maybe there should be some leniency and ability to people to be able to get all the way up to the elected body on certain cases. But I guess we'll, if we hear some uproar down the road, we can try to adjust accordingly.
Thank you. Question, Ms. Rubalcaba?
Yes. As far as the public review, was it a big turnout or not? Just because I know what that's like in my own hometown. So I'm just kind of wondering.
The workshop was very well attended. And we
Yeah,
actually held
okay.
it in Solvang, trying to
Okay.
meet everyone in the middle of the county. And we try to do that when we have some sources South County and some sources North County. I believe in the slide you presented, I think there were,
So there were 7 different, permitted facilities, and some of them sent multiple representatives to make sure that they all understood the requirements.
and when we held our Community Advisory Council meeting, that was very well attended as well.
Okay, just asking.
Are there questions from down south? Mr. Hart Williams, Ms. Hartman, anything? Okay. Then we would entertain a motion. Oh, there's a public comment.
Yes, I have one public speaker. This is Ben Oakley.
Mr. Oakley, would you come up, please? And you have 3 minutes, and there's a timer there.
Okay,
Welcome.
thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to speak on this rule. My name is Ben Oakley. I work for Pacific Coast Energy here locally, and I'm also on the Community Advisory Council. And we did have lots of opportunity to weigh in on the rule, so to allay some of the concerns about whether business entities are aware of this rule development, lots of opportunity. I'm going to talk today a little bit about thinking outside the box. And so, this rule, both of them put together, these changes will amount to 16.3 tons per year of NOx. We talked about that a little bit. And the quantified cost efficiency or effectiveness is anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000 per ton. And I think if you compare that to some other programs, for example, the vessel speed reduction program that we've heard a lot about, which is a fantastic program, which for 2018 removed 266 tons per year of NOx at a cost of this year less than $1,000 per ton, gives you a sense of what we're trying to achieve here with these rule changes. And granted, the program, the vessel speed reduction program, has been expanded to include the Bay Area. So I think that's now an increasingly efficient program, and is getting more cost effective. But even a couple of years ago, when it was a channel alone, it was around $4,000 a ton, so quite a bit cheaper than we're able to do in the stationary source area, which I think is a heck of a bargain. And I think this pie chart, and Mr. Goldman's going to give me a hard time for years to come for bringing this, but this is from the 2016 ozone plan, and it illustrates a little bit of what I'm talking about. If you see this blue piece of the pie, that's the stationary source part of the overall emissions picture in terms of NOx. And you can see there's some really big pieces of pie out there, one being this ocean-going vessels, and I think that speaks to why we can effectively do some really interesting programs in some of those other areas. So I think this also speaks to a bigger point, which is too often the balance between economic empowerment and environmental protection is viewed as being mutually exclusive or simply a zero-sum game. And I'm sure as elected officials you hear from folks who have this perspective all the time, and from both sides of the aisle, I think. I personally don't believe it's true. I think this public sector and private sector partnership of the vessel speed reduction program is strong evidence that it's not a zero-sum game. And I think that there are even more opportunities out there to be had if we work together to find them, and to pay for them. We can choose to protect the environment while at the same time protecting local jobs, but it requires collaboration along with some courage, political will, and creativity. Thanks.
Thanks so much. That was it for public speakers, ma'am? Okay.
I have a question.
So, yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you. So I guess I wasn't able to see on that chart, but I think what it is, so what were the other pieces of the pie? Is it things that we have no jurisdiction over, I think, right?
Stationary source is what we have regulatory
Right.
jurisdiction over.
And that's kind of been my mantra this whole time, is that we have jurisdiction over a very small piece, and then we take that piece and we try to chase zero to the point where it gets a little bit crazy when the rest of the pie is outside of our jurisdiction.
Yeah,
and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that's the state legislatures recognizing how beneficial incentive programs are, and that's why in your admin agenda today we had over 1.2 million going towards that, voluntary emission reductions. It's unfortunate that those programs aren't set up in a way that allows us to target the ocean-going vessels. It falls outside of the guidelines that the state has established, and hence we're seeking out other funding sources for that. One thing Mike Goldman always likes to recommend or to bring to our attention when we look at the NOx pie charts is, yeah, it's small. If it wasn't for our work here locally to do what we have been able to accomplish today, it would have been double that amount. So we've been able to bring it down, and with success. We're in transition non-attainment. We are getting there. Through our update to the ozone plan, this was the last set of rules that we've identified to bring us to the finish line. And once we get to that, we're going to be thinking about now how can we maintain attainment. And a lot of that energy will be going to secure more funding so we can expand what we do, get creative, think out of the box, see where we can get money for. Primarily right now, vessel speed reduction is where we need to be targeted.
Just one last thing on that vessel speed reduction. So how big is, I mean, what fraction are we even touching on vessel speed reduction? I mean, it's a target-rich environment, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
right? There's,
I honestly, I don't
Okay,
know how
all
many
right.
vessels and the percentage of vessels. We can bring that back when
It's
we
just-
bring the item again to
okay.
you. There's a lot of vessels out there. We have a lot of 14 vessels that have participated in this current incentive program that's underway. And of those, the total number of transits.
So I actually do have a lot of history with that knowledge because I play with a lot of the marine shipping calculations. So like this year or last year, we had 13 companies in the program, and from that, they make up 80% of the container ship population. So we're seeing around like 4,000 or so container ship transits throughout the entire season, but we're mainly focusing on like the ozone season, the 6 months from May to November. And so over those ships, we're maybe like slowing down, what was it, like 1,300 out of the 2,000 because we went for the fleet-based approach last year where we're saying, just keep on slowing down more and more, and we're hopefully going to see even greater participation in the upcoming year.
Okay. Ms. Sierra and then Mr. Mosby. Go ahead.
Okay, just a real quick question. Are you saying that if we can get the NOx down 16.3 tons, that we will have reached attainment then?
We have, through our ozone plan, we've defined a list of rules for your consideration that we feel will be needed to bring us to attainment based on our assessment of the ambient air quality trends, the emission inventory that we're working with. This was the last rule in our 2016 ozone plan that we are recommending for your consideration.
And this will put us in attainment?
We're hopeful. I mean, it's a challenging situation, and that's what the ozone planning process is all about. Every 3 years we reassess, we look at our ozone trend information, and we assess whether we're there or we have a little bit further to go. We are so close to being there. The thought is that this will assist us in reaching that goal.
Thank you.
Director Mosby?
Let me help you with being creative. I kind of offered this before, made a suggestion about potentials for mitigation, where people could use the financial, so something over here could be a lot more of a cost. but you're talking about a lot of dollars per ton. And if people could mitigate and the dollar could stretch further in slowing ships down than somebody making this other form of transition, and just the ability to mitigate this financially could significantly reduce way more than what they're doing just by the mandate through here. So you don't know if you have looked at it a possibility of allowing mitigation or not, or if you can, maybe you can.
Yeah, that's where we have the opportunity through the CEQA review process to identify different mitigation measures when a project can't reduce emissions below the significant threshold on site. So they've done everything possible to reduce their emissions. They're still exceeding the significant thresholds. That's when we have the opportunity to suggest mitigation. And we have been suggesting mitigation in the form of vessel speed reduction. Through our greenhouse gas reduction options, we have a menu of local projects for consideration.
Are you gaining any of that? Are you getting people to?
Well, we hope.
To
We,
bite?
we don't know where the projects are going to lie that are going through the pipeline right now, but we're hopeful that some of those companies will be considering some of the recommendations we outlined.
So there's a potential for companies in here to potentially mitigate?
Not from the regulation point of view. That would be from the land use lead agency CEQA mitigation point of view.
Is there ability to put something like that in here?
In this regulation,
Yeah,
not that I'm aware of.
okay. It seems like you could get more for the money.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind with these boilers too, a lot of the boilers that are going to be required to make change, they're old. They've been in place for 40 years. If you were to go in the marketplace and find a similar boiler, what you're going to be looking at are things that are already being used elsewhere in the state. So it's not technology forcing by any means. It's in the marketplace today.
Okay. Any questions or comments from Santa Barbara? Otherwise, we have some recommended actions. We're holding our hearing. We need to adopt the CEQA findings, the general rule findings, and then adopt the proposed amendments to these rules. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that was Williams Hartman. Any other discussion? We'll take a roll call vote, please. Oh, Ms. Patino, your lights on? Okay. Oh, you're gonna take okay. Okay, we're ready to take our vote.
Director Patino?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Hart?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Lavanino? Sierra?
Aye.
Parodi?
Aye.
Rubalcaba? Mosby?
Aye.
And Chair Murillo.
Aye. That was unanimous, I think.
Yes.
Okay, very good. That closes G3, and we go back to the regular sequence of our agenda to the approval of minutes. If you could find that on your, did everybody get a chance to look at the meeting summary of May 16th? And if so, is there a motion to accept it?
Madam Chair, I need to abstain. I was not here.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Motion
I'll
to
move
approve
it
the
since I was
Abstain as
here.
well. I wasn't here.
Okay. So we'll have to take a roll call vote anyway, and you can say abstain. So I'll move it. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So
Second.
Mario Patino, and we'll take a roll call vote, please, on the minutes.
Okay, so this is the approval of the minutes. Director Patino?
Aye.
Williams and Hartman just left, so we're going to go to Director Hart.
Aye.
Lavanino?
Abstain.
Sierra?
Aye.
Parodi?
Abstain.
Rubalcaba? Mosby?
Aye.
And Chair Murillo.
Aye. Very good. Thank you. We are reopening our public comment period. Everybody looks familiar out there. Mr. Hart, how's anyone there in Santa Barbara?
There is no one here.
Okay, we'll close our open public comment and go to the director's report, item F.
All right, thank you. I have 3 items to bring to your attention today. First is an air quality guidance template for schools. It's a handout that I provided. This is something that CAPCOA has been developing to provide assistance to school districts across California when and if, or when, I guess I should say, wildfire smoke impacts their area. As we've lived through these wildfires, it's been clear that messaging in the middle of an emergency is extremely difficult. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve and get some recommendations out to schools so they can figure out what actions they need to take to protect public health at schools. Senator Mike McGuire was very keen on pushing this idea so we have some uniformity across California. And it's like with anything, when you go from one air district to another, trying to get unanimous agreement amongst all of the air districts is challenging. What you have before you, it does mirror the air quality index with the color coding of green is good, yellow is moderate, and so on. However, it doesn't tie anyone into those specific values. It's meant and intended to be preliminary guidance that the schools will internalize and make custom for their own operations. But it includes activities such as recess, PE, even scheduling of sports events. So we are currently working with Susan Salcedo, the county superintendent of schools, to share the chart with the school districts. We're working on a letter that will accompany this activity chart to ensure that the school districts they have resources with us if they have any questions. And in addition to the County Office of Education, we're also going to be reaching out to private schools, daycares, preschools, and colleges countywide. So that's that item. Next item, air quality and cannabis operations. You may be aware the city of Carpinteria had a special meeting on Monday. It was covered in the local media, and we have heard through the media reports that a letter will be addressed to your board soon. We have not yet received it. We believe they're going to be requesting our assistance in ensuring air quality and public health is addressed through the cannabis operations. At our last board meeting, we provided our air quality advisory that was issued to provide guidance not only to the lead agencies, but also to the individuals that have voiced concerns and complaints to the air district. You know, you issue something and no one's ever happy, right? So there's a lot of concerns still out there about it. We're going to take the letter once we receive it. Once you receive it, it'll be addressed to the board actually. We'll assess what they're evaluating and make a determination if we need to bring this item back to your board for a discussion item in the future. And then lastly, I'm excited to announce, and we have a slide here we're going to put up on the screen. We have, can you put it in the other format? There, the air pointer has arrived. This has been our challenging project. We received your approval to move forward with the purchase in January. We received a grant from CARB for $50,000. This is a mobile device. It measures particulate matter, PM10 and 2.5, as well as H2S. It arrived this week at our office. It stands a little taller than I am, and it's not a personal, low-cost sensor by any means. It's going to take a trailer to move this thing around. So now we're just going through, we're calibrating all of the equipment. We're actually installing some of the equipment as well, making sure the communications are working. Once that's in place, we're going to bring it out to our air monitoring station and co-locate it for a certain period of time to ensure that it reads similar to our federal reference method. Once we have all of those checks and balances in place, it will be ready to roll. Theoretically, it will be ready to roll. It comes with a trailer that will tow behind our vehicle. Unfortunately, on a darn it note, the trailer was victim to a fire at the factory. So we're now working with the manufacturer trying to figure out when they can get a new trailer to Santa Barbara. So this will actually be something we can tow behind and move to where we need to place it. We're hopeful we have everything in place by October, because we know in October we have a need to measure H2S at hours when staff are not working. And that's our goal with this, is to be able to locate it in a safe location. It will require electricity. So we're going to be looking at all the city facilities as well as county department offices to have a deployment plan of where we can place this, where we'll have electrical outlet. and have access to read the pollutants. The information will be loaded up to our website, and it has the opportunity to measure pollutants 24/7 once it's fully functioning. So stay tuned, coming to a neighborhood close to you at sometime in the future. And that concludes my director's report.
Thank you so much. I'm especially grateful for the work you're doing with the schools. You reading about the masks kind of brought it back to me, how we were really choking on the bad air back at the end of 2017, at the beginning of 2018. So thanks for that and for everything in your report. We'll move on to G1, I believe, Ms. Hunt.
Item G1 is to select one member of the board to fill a vacant seat on the District Hearing Board Nominating Committee during the calendar year 2019.
Ms. Arlen Janae, is this your item?
Yes, it's my item. We had a recent change in a board member with the City of Guadalupe, and Mayor Julian, he had been appointed to the Hearing Board Nominating Committee, and with his departure as an alternate, he can no longer sit on this committee. So at this point, we have a vacancy that we're asking the board to fill. One thing we did notice, and that's highlighted in the staff letter, this position, this committee seat was intended to be from the 2nd District. So, and it slipped our mind at the last meeting, and something we were hoping we can correct today. So it would be the 2nd District, and I think you got an arm wrestle right now going on between Paula and Director Hart.
But Mayor Perotti is in
Chair
the
Murillo?
3rd District. Supervisor, oh, you have some 2nd District over there.
Chair Murillo, this is Director Hart in Santa Barbara. I'm happy to volunteer for this role if that helps.
Thank you, sir. I think we're happy to accept your volunteer.
All right. I'll second his nomination.
Very good. So we do need to take a vote. So we need to take a vote then? For sure? Okay.
Okay, Director Patino?
Aye.
Hart?
Aye.
Lavanino? Aye. Sierra?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Rubalcaba? Mosby? And Chair Murillo.
Aye. Very good. Congratulations, Mr. Hart.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll move on to G2.
Yes, item G2 is prescribed burn program grants. A, receive a report from the district's efforts related to prescribed burning, the California Air Resources Board prescribed burning reporting and monitoring support program, and the CARB prescribed burning air monitoring equipment cache storage program. B, adopt the resolutions authorizing the district's participation in these two programs. C, approve, ratify, and authorize the Air Pollution Control Officer to enter into the two following grant agreements with CARB. First is a grant in the amount of $25,000 to implement the prescribed burn reporting and monitoring support program for a term of June 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2021. And second, a grant in the amount of $30,000 to implement the prescribed burn air monitoring equipment cache storage program for a term of June 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2021.
I wish we had a number 4 that Sarah could read in for us. All right, so this item, similar to the last, incorporates 2 of our divisions. It has our compliance division is our primary lead as it relates to prescribed burn program, but also from the monitoring aspect, it pulls in planning. So this afternoon, Caitlin McNally, our manager of the compliance division, and will kick off the presentation, and then Molly Pearson, the manager of the planning division, will fill in the second half. So take it away.
Thank you, Erin. Good afternoon, Chair Murillo and members of the board. As Erin introduced, I'm Caitlin McNally, and this is Molly Pearson, and we'll be presenting to you today on our prescribed burn program grants. I wanted to point out, the photo on the right there is of a prescribed burn that occurred at the Vandenberg Air Force Base in 2017. Kind of a cool photo. All right. So during the presentation today, I will be giving you background on what prescribed burns are. Then I'll inform you about our current prescribed burn program at the district. and recent legislation regarding prescribed burns, California Senate Bill 1260. Then we'll be describing what we're here today for, which is the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, prescribed burn grant programs, the first of which is the Reporting and Monitoring Support Grant, and the second is the Air Monitoring Equipment Cache Storage Grant. Then Molly will talk about our air monitoring equipment that is used for prescribed burns and our current district air monitoring equipment storage. And then she'll talk about the recommendation that we're here today for your board. This photo is of the Rigetti Ranch prescribed burn that just happened in the end of 2018. Okay. All right, so to begin with, prescribed burns are the planned application of fire to vegetation to achieve specific objectives, which may include safety, land management, or resource management. Prescribed burns are administered by federal, state, local, or private land managers, and some examples of that here in Santa Barbara are the Santa Barbara County Fire Department and the U.S. Forest Service. The goal of prescribed burns is to reduce risk, severity, and impacts of wildfires. While prescribed burns do emit smoke, the smoke can be minimized, monitored, and managed to reduce air quality and health impacts as compared to wildfires. This photo, I really like this one, is of a prescribed burn that the U.S. Forest Service did at Figueroa Mountain in 2018, and it's pretty cool with the snow there and the burn. So, at the district, we currently have a successful and currently unfunded prescribed burn program. District Rule 401 identifies the requirements for prescribed burning, one of which is a requirement for a smoke management plan that ensures that minimal adverse health effects occur from smoke associated with prescribed burning. We use CARB's PFIR system, which stands for Prescribed Fire Information Reporting System, for the submittal, review, and approval of these plans. In addition, our prescribed burn program includes public outreach, which is done jointly by the land manager and our public information officer. First, we issue a news release a few weeks before the planned prescribed burn to inform the public of the burn window and the details for the burn. And second, we do a media advisory either the day before or the day of the burn to let the public know that the burn is going to occur. In addition, our public information officer shares information via social media, including targeted posts to neighborhoods via Nextdoor. This graphic on the right is a recent media release that we did, or media advisory that we did for the Burton Mesa prescribed burn. We also use EBAMs, which are environmental beta attenuation monitors, to measure air quality from prescribed burns with potential impacts. And this information is displayed on our website for the public to view. Molly is going to go into more detail about EBAMs later in the presentation. We report the prescribed burn data to CARB on an annual basis. I also wanted to share that we coordinate closely with other agencies as part of our program, and one recent example that we had was a prescribed fire field day that we participated in January of 2019, which was organized by the University of California Cooperative Extension to bring elected officials, agency representatives, regulators, and ranchers together to discuss prescribed burns. On the legislative front, California Senate Bill 1260 was enacted in September of 2018 to reduce the risk of wildfires by using prescribed burning for fire prevention, public health, and public safety. This bill requires CARB and the air districts to develop and fund enhanced prescribed burn programs throughout California. There are specific rules for air districts, including enhanced air quality and smoke monitoring and a public awareness campaign. Related to this legislation, our district has participated in a Governor's Forest Management Task Force to engage and collaborate with other agencies throughout the state on prescribed burns. And this photo is of one of our most recent prescribed burns in the county at Burton Mesa that was conducted by the Santa Barbara County Fire Department in 2019. All right, so the main reason we're here today is for the CARB prescribed burn grant programs. They've identified 2 programs associated with prescribed burn activities that were called for under SB 1260. The first is a $25,000 grant for the Reporting and Monitoring Support Program, which I'll talk more about on the next slide. The second is for an air monitoring equipment cache storage program, which Molly will go into more detail about later in the presentation. And that one is for $30,000. These grants are part of the California Climate Investments Program. In addition to these grants, cost reimbursement funding will be available through CAPCOA, which is the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, for staff costs to deploy portable air monitoring equipment like the EBAM that I mentioned earlier, and training for district staff. So the first grant program I mentioned in the last slide is the Reporting and Monitoring Support Program. And this program includes smoke management plans, use of PFAS for all prescribed burns, and the graphic on the right of the slide is a screenshot of the PFAS website. Public outreach, air monitoring, quarterly reporting to the California Air Resources Board, a final report at the end of the grant period, and smoke management program training. As I mentioned earlier, the district is already implementing the majority of these program elements, and we're looking forward to finally getting funding for these efforts that we have. Now Molly's going to talk to you about the Air Monitoring Equipment Cache Storage Grant Program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm fine here, thanks. So the district is also set to receive a grant from CARB in the amount of $30,000 in order to store and maintain particle monitors that can be deployed throughout the Central Coast and Southern California regions, not just Santa Barbara County, during these prescribed burns. The monitors are actually supplied by CARB, and the district is going to make sure they're functional and ready for use when they're needed by those land managers. So when they need to be deployed by those other agencies, as part of their prescribed burn efforts, the district is going to help provide access to the equipment. So this slide shows the tasks that are identified in the grant, including equipment tracking, ordering supplies, training, and reporting. So here's the EBAM we've been talking about so much, the Environmental Beta Attenuation Monitor, and I'm actually going to, it's not as sophisticated as the air pointer that Aaron showed you. It probably is about the same height, but actually I'm going to talk about the anatomy of an EBAM, and starting with the head. So these units use the same measurement technology as our reference method monitors, and they can be set up to measure either PM10 or PM2.5. That depends on the sample head there at the top. So for smoke monitoring, they're generally set up to monitor PM2.5. So the sample is drawn through the sample head on top, and then it goes down into the abdomen, and it lays on a filter media tape, and that's where the measurements are made in real time. Then the readings can be displayed on a website. It communicates with our website and makes it available to the public. So this instrument is also equipped with meteorological sensors, and those are the arms. There's relative humidity on one arm, and then there's a wind speed and temperature on the other. So that's an EBAM for you. Though not quite as sophisticated as an air pointer, but it's still a great way to measure smoke through the particle counts. And so our equipment storage. The district office has an air monitoring lab already that we use to store equipment, maintain our equipment, do troubleshooting and testing of equipment before we deploy it. And we already own one EBAM portable monitor. It's been deployed throughout the county for the last few years for multiple purposes, including wildfires, prescribed burns, and special studies. During recent wildfire events, we also coordinated with CARB to facilitate the deployment of their EBAM monitors to assess smoke impacts from wildfires. In this case, we're talking about prescribed burns, but we have done that facilitation in the past. So the district already has really sufficient resources and well-trained monitoring staff to meet the needs of this grant opportunity. And the agreement will enhance our ability to coordinate with other agencies on these prescribed burns and protect people from the health effects of smoke throughout the region. And so, getting to the recommendation, In summary, we recommend that you adopt the resolutions authorizing the district's participation in the CARB prescribed burn grant programs, and approve, ratify, and authorize the Air Pollution Control Officer to enter into CARB grant agreements for the first one that Caitlin reviewed, which is the prescribed burn reporting and monitoring support program for $25,000. And the second one, which I just reviewed, is the air monitoring equipment cash storage program for $30,000. And that is the end of our presentation. Here's our contact information, and Caitlin and I are here to answer your questions.
Are there questions for Ms. McNally or Ms. Pearson? Mr. Levanino?
Thank you. So I'm trying to figure out, so the grant is for, like, if somebody want to do a smoke plan, so they want to do a prescribed burn, how much does a smoke plan cost to put together?
So the grant is for our purposes to implement the program. The district receives the funds and uses them to pay our costs.
So it
a
doesn't go
smoke
out,
management plan doesn't cost anything for the land manager to submit to us. It may cost them money to actually spend time and put it together, but they have staff that typically is already handling the actual organizing the prescribed burn. So it's one of the many steps that they have to do as part of that.
So the grant is actually coming from CARB to us, but we
Yes.
don't pass it along. It's cover
No,
our
it's
costs.
not a
associated.
pass-through
Okay,
grant.
thank you.
Any other questions from Santa Maria? Mr. Hart, I appreciate your fidelity. You're still there. Anything from you?
No, thank you.
Thanks. And then a motion would be in order. Oh, I'm sorry. Public comment? No? Okay. Thanks. Would you like to make a motion since you have the floor?
I'll make a motion to move staff recommendations.
And a second from Ms. Perotti, it looks like? Okay, very good. We'll take a roll call vote. Thank you so much for your presentation, your hard work.
Okay, this is for item G2. Director Patino,
Aye.
Hart,
Aye.
Lavanino, Sierra,
Aye.
Perotti,
Aye.
Rubalcaba, Mosby, and Chair Murillo.
Aye. That passes unanimously. And we go to announcements.
Yes, the only announcement we have is that this meeting will be rebroadcast on Sunday, June 23rd, 2019 at 5 p.m. on the County of Santa Barbara TV Channel 20.
Yeah, tune in. And if there's no other discussion, I'll adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.